All right. We're going to need just a minute. You're like, more minutes? Yes, more minutes. I need the remote. No, the projector remote. Right there. Thank you. Well, that's kind of useless, isn't it? What? Lock rotation. Does that do it? No. Great. Okay. Well, it's just the way that it wants to operate. Okay, so this is going to be a little awkward because it doesn't want to rotate the way that I want to rotate it. So remember last week that I had talked about the way the tribes were distributed. Oh, that's beautiful. Doesn't want to show in the correct way. So there we go. So in the middle, the tabernacle, right? To the north, Asher, Naphtali, and Dan. The emblem of Dan is the eagle. To the east, Issachar, Judah, and Zebulun. The emblem of Judah is the lion. To the south, Gad, Reuben, and Simeon. Reuben's symbol is man. Man. And to the west, Benjamin, Ephraim, and Manasseh. Ephraim's symbol is the ox, or the bull. There's significance in that. Like I said last week, there's significance in the fact that the tribes were faced around. The openings to their tents opened to the tabernacle. The camp did not have tents facing out from the tabernacle. So you walk out your tent in the morning, guess what you see? Now, can anybody tell me what the significance of the ox, eagle, lion, and man is? What's that, Mom? You're on the right track. Do you remember the cherubim? Very good. So the cherubim that are on the lid of the Ark of the Covenant are described for us in more detail in Revelation. And they have 4 faces: man, ox, eagle, and lion. The tabernacle, by being in the middle, laid out with the tribes in those specific spots, followed the same pattern as heaven, with the cherubim reaching out in protection with the face of the ox, the eagle, the lion, and man. So even the very layout of the camp speaks to the picture of what is in heaven. This is what was being said when Moses was told to lay out everything according to what he had saw. Or, pardon me, what he had seen. Does that make sense? I promised you that I'd show you a picture of the tabernacle with the tribes. The Levites were just at the entrance of the tabernacle and around it. So you see those there. You'll notice with the 12 tribes that are scattered around that to the north, south, east, and west, that the Levites do not have a camp in that section, yet there's still 12 tribes. Does everybody know how that happens? Yes, Joseph's sons. Okay. Any questions about the layout? Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. All right, so your question is, why are the ones in the middle that represent the characters, why are those pointed out? The fact that they represent the faces of the cherubim in relation to heaven. Each of them has an emblem that represents them. Zebulun is a ship. Issachar is an ass under burden, so he's got a laden down donkey. A leaping stag, a goblin or a cup. Benjamin's a wolf. Manasseh is an olive branch with arrows. Gad is a leader with a troop following. And then Simeon is a sword at the city gate. So they each have emblems. The emblems representing the specific tribes are what was an image of the tribe's identity, basically. Different traits of different people. Judah is known as the lion and acted similar to that type of thing. So their emblems that they took meant something about their family, who they were, that type of thing. It represented them. And those four were specifically set out because of what they represented specifically. And it's by design that they'd be in the middle of those groupings of three. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Yes? So, it's very obvious for the ox, the lion, and the lamb, but how do they get the eagle out of it? Because it's not in the name of the primary. Out of Dan? Yeah. The eagle is actually part of the emblem. It doesn't list it there. Just like Judah, it includes 3 lions, a scepter, and a grapevine. This is unfortunately not my image, but man and water, unicorn with a horn, or bullocks, that type of thing. So the eagle is represented by those things, and it is included in the emblem as well, and that's what's being pointed out in that regard. The sons of Levi. The tribe of Levi surrounds the inner circle right around the tabernacle because they are the ones tasked with its upkeep, its maintenance, with the spiritual lives of all of Israel. So they protect the heart of it, which is the tabernacle. Any more questions? All right, so that's your nice to know section. That's the follow-up. You got it fixed? All right. So give me just one more moment and I'll be back and we'll finish up with our sermon real quick. So if you remember, we were in Hebrews 9. Look at that, a bookmark right there. Hebrews 9, specifically verses 9 and 10 today. Be prepared. There will also be some quick looks in Leviticus. So if you're not familiar with where that is, make sure that you are ready. So Hebrews 9, verses 9 and 10. This is an illustration pointing to the present time, for the gifts and sacrifices that the priest offer are not able to cleanse the consciences of the people who bring them. For that old system deals only with food and drink and various cleansing ceremonies, physical regulations that are in effect until a better system could be established. So the author of Hebrews is very specific to point out that these things, the old system, the law that took place, is an image of what takes place at the present time. Again, it's an image, a shadow, a copy of what takes place. Just like the tabernacle is an image, a shadow, a copy. So each Day of Atonement, the priest, the high priest, was to slaughter a bull for himself. You can find a description of that in Leviticus 7. If you want to know precisely how he cut, what exactly he was supposed to do with those things, how he was supposed to trim the fat, the organs, how long he was supposed to burn the altar, I would highly suggest you take a look at that. It is a very boring section. It's a boring section to us, but to them it was their lifeblood. You have to understand, when you take somebody out of a situation, particularly like slavery, if you take somebody out of an abusive relationship, if you take somebody out of something that is broken, where that's the only thing that they know, you have to train them to know what normal is. You have to give them the opportunity to learn to see how reality should work for them. Because that damage lingers on. Those that are brought out of slavery cannot rule themselves. They don't know how to rule themselves. It's one of those cruel ironies where you dream of freedom, but once you have it, you have no idea what to do with it. Because that is what you're used to. That is what you grow up in. When you're in an abusive relationship, when you grow up, children that are abused have a tendency to join into relationships where they are yet again abused. Why is that? It's because it's normal. To them, that's how things are supposed to work. Even though they rally against it and don't want it, that's what seems to suck them back in. My nephew Alex, he's around chaos 24/7. Television's on all the time, video games being played all the time, music being played all the time. Nobody knows what one person is doing the next. It's a situation of chaos. So what does he do? You've all experienced this. He comes into a situation and he creates his own chaos. We have had many a discussion in our family about this. He has to learn what a real relationship is. He has to learn that there is peace and calm, and that's okay. But unless somebody comes along and teaches him this, he will spend his whole life seeking out that chaos. This is what God is doing for the Israelites. They have lived their lives in slavery up to this point. They need to understand how society should work, how to govern themselves. God has sent Moses to them, Moses who had spent time with the ruling class. He had spent time getting educated. He had the knowledge of how to be a leader. He was raised as if he was a leader. God brings him in and says, this is what you need to do, and this is how you need to set it up, exactly as you have seen it, so that they can understand and know. One of the things that they needed to learn was how to deal with the fact that they sin, that they're not clean, that they're not set apart. Because they are clean. They are now set apart. It's a new situation for themselves. They have been taken out and separated. And God had said, "You are my people." Now they have to learn how to deal with that, how to live in that situation. All of these things, the picture of the tabernacle, the way the tents were set up, the focus of the tabernacle in the center of their camp is designed for them to understand where they can find that leadership they need, what it should look like. For them to understand this, it has to be a mechanical thing for them to learn the basics. But if you stick all the time with the mechanical and you never move past that, it becomes as if nothing to you, because you do it as a rhythm, you do it as a rote. It's just something that takes place. That's the next step that Pastor Monty will take us to in the coming up weeks. We're still dealing with the old ways, the old schools, those mechanics. Every time you were guilty of a sin, every time you were guilty of being unclean, a sacrifice had to be made. Turn with me to Leviticus chapter 6. Leviticus chapter 6, starting in verse 1. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Suppose one of you sins against an associate, is unfaithful to the Lord. Suppose you cheat on a deal involving a security deposit, or you steal or commit fraud, or you find lost property and lie about it, or you lie while swearing to tell the truth, or you commit any other such sin. If you have sinned in any of these ways, you are guilty. You must give back whatever you stole, the money you took through extortion, the security deposit, or the lost property you found, or anything obtained by swearing falsely. You must make restitution by paying the full price, an additional 20% to the person you have harmed. On the same day, you must present a guilt offering. As a guilt offering to the Lord, you must bring to your priest your own ram with no defects. You may buy one of equal value. Through this process, the priest will purify you before the Lord, making him right with you." Turn back one chapter to Leviticus 5, verse 1. If you are called to testify about something you have seen or that you know about, it is sinful to refuse to testify, and you will be punished for your sin. Or suppose you unknowingly touch something that is ceremonially unclean, such as the carcass of an unclean animal. When you realize what you have done, you must admit your defilement and your guilt. This is true whether it is a wild animal, a domestic animal, or an animal that scurries along the ground. Or suppose you unknowingly touch something that makes a person unclean. When you realize that you have done this, you must admit your guilt. Or suppose you make a foolish vow of any kind, whether its purpose is for good or for bad, and then you realize its foolishness, you must admit your guilt. When you become aware of your guilt in any of these ways, you must confess your sin. Then you must bring to the Lord as a penalty for your sin a female from the flock, either a sheep or a goat. This is a sin offering for which the priest will purify your sin. Even if you do something unknowingly, as soon as you realize that you have done this, as soon as you realize you've committed this sin, you had to make yourself ceremonially clean again. You had to have the priest sacrifice an animal, blood to cover your transgression. The one issue with this whole system is that it deals specifically with the physical. The physical uncleanliness caused guilt. Does that sound familiar to anybody? What happened in Genesis? Adam realized he was naked and he grew ashamed. His physicalness brought him guilt. Whether or not he deserved that guilt or should have acted on that guilt is beside the question. It brought guilt to him, and that is what the law deals with. Because we are attached to the physical, that is what the law addressed, the physical. It is by showing you that your guilt is covered by the shedding of blood. The animals that were slaughtered for clothes for Adam and Eve to cover their shame, to absolve them of that guilt. The law deals with what you can eat, what you can touch. It doesn't deal with your spirit at all. If you unknowingly commit a sin and you don't really realize it, there is the Day of Atonement for you. The Day of Atonement is the day that the high priest goes into the Holy of Holies after sprinkling blood upon himself from a bowl on the tabernacle, the entirety of the tabernacle, on the veil and onto the mercy seat. Then going back and taking a goat after drawing lots to choose between two of them. Sacrificing that goat and ceremonially cleansing everything with the blood of that animal. Splashing the mercy seat on the ark with the blood of that animal. And then taking the one who won or lost, depending on how you look at it, and praying those sins that are unknown from all of the people of Israel onto that goat. And there was a set person that would then take that goat out into the middle of the desert of Israel and let it go. And then when they came back, they had to be cleansed as well. All of this has to deal with the physical. And that is why it's insufficient. But it serves its purpose because it teaches them the mechanics. It drives home the point that they need to be clean. There is blood to be shed for these things. So how does that look in this day and age? Obviously, we're not going to go around slaughtering goats. There's still mechanics that need to be had, yes. There's still things that we need to learn with rhyme, rhythm, and rote. How do we do that in a day and age when we don't have a thing that says, if you touch this, then go and present 2 turtle doves to the high priest? How do we deal with those things? How do we take care of those physical things? Because the physical is still important and it still needs to be dealt with. That's what you need to discuss. That's what you need to uncover. They're talking. We know it's going to happen because it says so in the Bible, but they're talking about bringing the temple back. They're talking about reinstating the sacrificial system. They're talking about, even this day and age, going back to the law because there is comfort in the law and in the mechanics. Are you ready for that? Please discuss these types of things. And we'll meet back here in about 20 minutes, yeah? Thank you for your patience.